Thank you. Have fun. Thank you. Have fun, man.
Hello, everyone. Or hello, New York. Yes, I'm a resident of the East Village. I love New York, and I'm glad to be here. These two gentlemen also live in New York, I believe.
Yeah, correct.
So I'm going to briefly say their names and what they do, and then I'll let them sort of introduce their company and why they have their company and what it means to this talk. But I'll briefly just say I'm Douglas Crets. I run DBC Media. I'm mostly like an ed tech blogger. I offer social media strategy help for nonprofits and startups. And I'm here to talk about, with these two gentlemen, the shadow education system, and what that means, in short, is that the stuff that's being invented, or the learning that's taking place, or the teaching that's taking place outside of the formal education system. So immediately to my left is Jeremy Johnson, the CMO of Tutor.com, and right to his left is Matt Mahoney, who's the CEO of Daily Endeavor. Jeremy, why don't you tell us about you, what you do, and what is Tutor.com?
Sure, thanks. Tutor partners with elite U.S. universities to build really high-quality online degree programs and then help support those programs logistically through their life cycle. So actually a number of you guys are here from our first partner program, which is the MAT at USC, an award-winning Master of Arts in Teaching program with the University of Southern California. So we work with great schools to essentially help them rethink what online education in higher education will look like in the 21st century, and then try to create the absolute best program possible through a combination of technology as well as logistical support.
Right on.
Matt?
And my name's Matt. Daily Endeavor, very briefly, we are working on helping everyone answer one particular question that we all face pretty often, which is, what do I want to do next for work? And in particular, we help people understand the types of jobs that exist out there, the universe of jobs that are out there. And the way we do that is you can go and learn about jobs through the point of view, through the experience of other people who've had that job. And for me, the connection, Doug, to ask the question, learning is not what happens between 3 and 23. Learning is what happens while we're alive in our waking hours. And the biggest potential, sort of 23 on, for us to learn, certainly as parents in other ways, but it's in our work life. So sort of as a last kind of thought there, that for me, companies and organizations and places of work are places of learning. And there's a lot of work to do to up-level how we learn there. And one of those very beginning places is making better choices about where we go to work based on what we can learn there.
Sure, so sort of like using the web for some real-time education, teaching yourself what you need to know to make the next decision you need to make in order to improve your life. So it's sort of like live education. So with that being said, I started with the premise for the first question of, you have a real-time web, you have also a social web, you have user-generated content. Let's look at K through 12 for an example. You used to have to wait until the next year's textbook came out to learn that Pluto is no longer a planet. But now you can get information as soon as it becomes available. I'd like to know, just from your personal perspectives, through the higher ed lens and also through the working lens and the K through 12 lens, how does that availability of real-time information, how does the existence of a social web impact this formal education system we have in place right now? Start with Matt and then go to Jeremy.
Well, if you think about where learning occurs, let's take it in K through 12 just for a second. It occurs in 3 places, right? It's between the student and the teacher, between the teacher and the teacher, and the student and the student. And one of the things that we can do now with all the real-time web and all the sort of other jargon stuff related to it is we can work more openly. And this has been happening sort of in the consumer space with blogs and so on for over 10 years, a dozen years. It's been happening inside companies, and now it's starting to happen in education as well. So by working more openly, what I mean is, you having tweet-ups on Twitter, or you're group forming, you're getting together a group on Google Plus or on a Hangout. And the students, the pairing and peering that can happen, the cost of that is gone to zero. So getting together and doing work together, making stuff together where actually learning occurs, the cost of that, the ease of that is increasing. If you're a teacher and you want to, one of the biggest costs or in time is assessing. It's figuring out, you give some work and you ask the question, how'd it go for that student or even among a group of students? Well, when people are working openly, you can read their feed on Google+. You can see who participated and what they did and how they got there. Sure. And I guess the third thing is because it's so much less expensive and so much easier to get together and make stuff. What we're going to and that stuff sticks around, we're going to have is a lot of artifacts of really great things that people can use. In the beginning, it's going to be source material. Think about the Khan Academy, for example. There's a huge library starting there. But more and more, it's going to be things beyond source material, ways to respond to source material.
Okay, so Jeremy, how do you tackle that answer or that question?
At the core of a great educational experience is really an ongoing conversation between yourself and your peers. So in college, by immersing yourself in a campus environment, what you do is you put yourself in the center of this ongoing conversation, which lasts for 4 years, and sometimes involves professors. But at its core, it's really an ongoing conversation. What I would argue social media and sort of the real-time web enables in higher education is really the continuation of that, but also the creation of a really high-quality academic experience online. I think looking at K through 12, what it really allows from an opportunity standpoint is for teachers to extend the classroom into an ongoing conversation the way that a college student or someone on campus would experience their education. So for instance, the fact that students are connected through Twitter or can create Facebook groups together and use those to communicate throughout the day with each other, with their teachers, and with other people who are outside of that direct academic experience, allows those K through 12 students to experience the ongoing conversation much in the same way that college students are able to. So I think it's really that continuation and bringing it into one's daily life that creates a huge opportunity.
Okay, I don't know if you would say it this way, though, but when I listen to both of you talk, and we talk about this sense of being outside or extending the conversation to peers, for example, is there any threat to the credibility of teachers? I mean, what about the accreditation process in higher ed, the credentialing of teachers? If we can learn more from our peers or collaborate better with our peers, what do we need teachers for? And who can be a teacher? I mean, you're doing with the master's program in teaching, you guys work with that. How would you address this? I
would argue there's no diminishing the quality or the actual sort of need for great teachers in any way, shape, or form, or really for the number of teachers. I think that, if anything, we desperately need more great teachers. Studies have shown consistently that teachers are the single most important factor in a student's educational outcome. So great teachers are paramount and will continue to be, regardless of sort of those interactions. I think the challenge is enabling those great teachers to connect more broadly, again, going back to sort of a student's experience, not just in the classroom, but throughout their lives, by having great teachers able to connect with students throughout a student's life. You know, a great example would be Voxy, which is a mobile device or a mobile app which allows English language learners to immerse themselves in English language learning throughout the course of the day. So if you walk into a bank, for instance, it'll give you examples of things you could say in this environment which are directly relevant and that therefore bring the learning to where you are. I think that type of immersion it's a huge opportunity for K through 12.
That's good. And let's bookmark that, because I want to come back to something you just said. But what about Matt? What is your view on this?
Let's see. Right now, the institutions we have own accreditation. And they've done a good job with it. The cost is going up, but they've done a good job with it by and large. But the institutions don't own achievement, for example. So if you want to go out and if you want to go to Udemy and take a class, for example, you can get better at some specific thing. Now, the person who teaches that class, they might be an accredited teacher, or they might be someone who's not and happens to know deep about that topic. So I think the drive to grow and the drive to learn is bigger than any given institution. I think specifically to your question of like, well, is there a threat to teachers? I agree with Jeremy. It's the best teachers are going to use this to get even better, and the best teachers are the ones who use the tools sparingly, but are the ones running the conversation or running what's happening, designing what's happening with their group, whether present or remotely. And there's an art to that. There's an art to that that standardized tests are not only scratch the surface of, right? It's a different ball game. So they're going to get even better. But it's not going to stop, to your sort of shadow thesis. It's not going to stop a whole bunch of other people from getting together and teaching, including peer-to-peer stuff. Yeah. People are going to be teaching each other. And I think that's fantastic. I think that raises the bar for everyone.
So that to me seems like a great challenge and an opportunity for education, both in higher ed and K through 12. It kind of goes back to your mention of a mobile app, is using education to solve a local problem or a immediate problem, using solutions that are at hand through a wide network of people that are far away or very close. So I'm wondering, like, in the current education system, and not to like tear it down, because I used to be a teacher, I'm very fond of education as a system. I think it works largely. Are we doing the right things in education to prepare students for a future that may not exist? I've heard you've talked about this before. It may not exist in the same form that it looks like now while they're in those immediate grade levels. Even as far as higher ed, you know, any views on those two things? I mean, can you wrap your head around what I'm trying to say, that there's sort of like a system in place that trains students to do things a certain way, but then once they get out into the real world much later, the world may have changed and looks different than it did when they were being taught?
I think the challenge is that technology moves very, very quickly, very quickly. Mm-hmm. People move much more slowly, mm-hmm. and institutions move even more slowly. And so, yes, there's no question that the world is moving far more quickly than our standard curriculum developed through institutions is evolving. I think the challenge and also the opportunity, therefore, is for teachers, and you know, many fantastic ones in this room, to use social media and to use technology as it's evolving and to bring it into classrooms. I mean, I've seen examples of people using Tumblr for extra credit, or you know, creating chats through Twitter for their class specifically. That's sure, when those sixth graders graduate from high school, the world will look very different, but their comfort with learning something new and their comfort with adapting to new technology and using it in an educational way is something that will stay with them and that will prepare them for what's to come. It won't come from the institutions, unfortunately.
That's interesting. Okay. And Matt, you phrase that?
You know, I think there's, I was going to say pockets of good. I think it's more than pockets. There's big zones of good happening in K through 12. Amazing teachers, amazing schools doing great things. So the idea about, you know, is the what and the how in schools relevant to what's happening in the outside world? Well, I mean, look at SLA, we were talking about before, inquiry-based things. Like if you're going to go out and learn science, but you're doing it by actually doing the work of the science, that's fantastic. And that looks a lot like what problem solving looks like if you're not inside the four walls of a school. And I think it takes advantage of the natural desire for people to grow. Before in some ways it's beaten out of them, or let me say it differently, before in some ways they learn that that's not the way to get ahead. But if they do really want to grow and learn, like people can seek out those places. Well, in some cases in K through 12 they can seek it out. Once you're in your work life, it's completely your responsibility to seek it out. You need to run that. But I think the main thing though is, given the pace of the tools, and the tools are available to everyone, people are going to seek out learning. In particular, it could be a 24-year-old or 55-year-old, but 12-year-olds are going to seek out learning. And if they're not finding it within the day of their school, they're going to route around that. Humans are slower than technology for sure, but we do a great job of routing around and finding the things we need. And I think that's already happening completely today.
Okay, we got 27 seconds left. And I just wanted to say thank you to Jeff Pulver and for Chris Lehman for putting this together. It's been very fabulous, and I feel like I've learned today in real time. And just to take us out in 2 seconds, tell me the one skill kids these days are going to have to learn and need once they get out of school for each of you. 2 seconds.
It's teaching. Every manager is a teacher. It's teaching each other.
And I would argue it's transitioning from content knowledge to actually being able to learn effectively in any environment. It's about learning how to learn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.